The winter of 1996 was the coldest Kashmir had seen in decades. Snow-buried villages, and the frozen Dal Lake shimmered under a pale, lifeless moon. But in the small village of Kandarpura, something far worse than the cold had arrived. Then, one evening, a military rescue team was sent to investigate. 7 men, armed with rifles and flashlights, arrived at the village just before sunset. What they found defied reason. The houses were untouched, meals half-eaten, fireplaces still burning, beds still warm, but there was no one left, not a single footprint leading out of the village. It was as if the entire population had evaporated into thin air. Yet, something watched them. As the soldiers searched the last house, one of them, Corporal Javed, felt an overwhelming sense of dread. He turned to his comrade, only to find the man staring blankly ahead, eyes wide and unblinking. "Sir," Javed whispered, shaking him. The man's lips trembled. Then he screamed. A gut-wrenching, inhuman scream. The others rushed in, but by the time they reached him, the soldier had stopped moving. His skin had turned an unnatural shade of blue, his pupils gone, replaced by 2 gaping black holes. His mouth was stuck open, as if frozen mid-scream. Then, the knocking began. 3 knocks. At the window. The men spun around, guns raised. A figure stood outside in the snow. Aisha, the missing girl. She was smiling. But her teeth were missing. And her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Instead, from somewhere in the distance, they heard her giggle. The giggling grew louder. It came from all directions. The men ran. One by one, the screams returned. One by one, they vanished. By morning, the village was empty again. But this time, there was something new. At the center of the village, written in the snow, was a single word. Welcome. And below it, the footprints led into the woods. Would you like to continue, or do you want a twist ending? It started with the whispers. At night, villagers reported hearing low voices outside their windows, speaking in a language no one could understand. The voices slithered through the darkness, sometimes laughing, sometimes sobbing. At first, people thought it was the wind, but soon, the whispers turned into knocks. 3 knocks, always 3. A shepherd named Yasin was the first to disappear. One evening, he left his home to check on his cattle. He never returned. The next morning, his footprints led deep into the forest, but there was no sign of him. Only his lantern was found, still lit, burning in the snow. The villagers feared the forest, for it was said to be cursed. Long ago, during a brutal winter, an entire clan had vanished there, leaving behind only bones and broken prayers. Some said a terrible witch had lured them in. Others believed something older and hungrier lived among the trees. Days later, a child named Aisha disappeared. Her mother swore she had only turned away for a second, and then Aisha was gone. Then came the screaming. At night, the villagers heard it, high-pitched wails echoing from the woods, each one more agonizing than the last. Some claimed they heard their missing loved ones calling for help, but no one dared to go near the trees after dark. That was until Raymond Malik, the village elder, decided to put an end to the terror. Armed with a torch and a rusted axe, he led a group of men into the cursed forest. They never returned. Days passed. Then one night, the knocking came again, this time at every door in the village. 3 knocks. When the villagers looked outside, they saw something that shattered their minds. Standing in the snow, hundreds of figures stood motionless, their faces twisted in agony. Their skin was blackened with frostbite, their mouths frozen open in silent screams. Among them were Yasin, little Aisha, and Raymond Malik. But their eyes were the worst part. They were missing. Instead, dark holes stared back, leaking something thick and black onto the snow. The villagers slammed their doors shut, bolted their windows, and prayed, but it was useless. Because the whispers had already crept inside. One by one, the people of Kandarpura vanished into the night. By morning, the entire village was silent. Except for the footprints leading back into the woods. And the snow, now dyed black. Days passed, then weeks. No traveler who ventured to Kandarpura returned. The village, once alive with voices and the scent of burning wood, now stood abandoned, buried under the endless snow. The army didn't give up after the first teen's disappearance. 2 weeks later, a second unit of 10 soldiers, led by Captain Arif Khan, was sent to Kandarpura. Their orders were clear: investigate, recover, eliminate any threat. One transcript stood out. It was the last radio message sent before the unit disappeared. February 16, 1996, 2:47 a.m. Captain Arif, something is wrong. We're seeing them, the missing villagers, but they are not human. We need immediate evacuation. Command, acknowledged. Sending rescue. Captain Arif, negative. No one comes here. It's not a village anymore. It's static. Screams. Then, a different voice took over the radio, a child's voice. 3 knocks. Then silence. That was the last transmission ever received. A town that shouldn't exist. Curious, Adil ignored the warnings and set out for Kandarpura with his cameraman, Rafiq. But there was no village. Where the village once stood, there was only an endless, snow-covered field. No buildings, no ruins, nothing, as if Kandarpura had never existed. But then Rafiq screamed. Adil turned and saw him standing frozen, pale, trembling. In the snow, right where the village should have been, were hundreds of footprints leading into the woods. And then they heard it. A soft, echoing knock. Boom, boom, boom. Adil turned to run, but before he could move, he saw her. Standing at the edge of the field, Aisha smiled at him. Her lips moved. And though no sound came out, he heard her voice inside his head. We never left. Then darkness. The next morning, villagers found Adil's abandoned jeep near the woods. The doors were open, the engine was still running. But Adil and Rafiq were never seen again. All that remained was a camera, buried in the snow. And when the footage was played back, the last frame was Adil's face, eyes wide, mouth frozen open, black tears streaming down his cheeks. And behind him, hundreds of shadowy figures stood in the snow. Watching. Waiting. And then, the screen cut to black. Epilogue, a final warning. To this day, no map shows Kandarpura. No record of it exists. But sometimes, on freezing nights in Kashmir, villagers still hear it. 3 knocks. And if you listen closely, you might hear a girl's giggle. Then, the whisper will come. We never left. The end. Would you like an alternate ending or more details? But whispers spread. Locals knew the truth. Something evil had awakened in Kandarpura. They arrived just as night fell. The village looked untouched. The houses still stood as if waiting for their owners to return. The air was heavy, suffocating. Even the snow, once white, seemed gray and lifeless. Arif's men set up a perimeter, but before they could begin their search, the radio crackled a faint, static-filled voice whispering, "Leave." The voice was distorted, but it sounded like one of their own men. Then, something moved in the distance. A figure, a soldier in a Kashmiri army uniform, stumbled toward them. It was Corporal Javed, the man who had disappeared 2 weeks ago. But something was wrong. His uniform was torn and stiff with blood, his head twitched violently, and his eyes were gone. Yet he spoke. "Captain, they are still here." Then, his mouth stretched open far too wide until his jaw cracked. And from deep within, something whispered. 3 knocks. At that moment, every house in the village shook with the sound of knocking. Boom, boom, boom. The men raised their rifles, scanning the darkness. Then, they heard it. Laughter. Low at first, then rising, high-pitched, echoing, inhuman. It came from every direction, from the rooftops, the alleys, even beneath the frozen earth. Then, the doors burst open. The missing villagers stepped out, but they were not human anymore. Their limbs were contorted, their mouths hung open in silent screams, their empty eye sockets leaked blackness, a thick, moving shadow that slithered toward the soldiers like living tendrils. Then, the lights went out. The last thing Captain Arif saw before darkness swallowed them all was Aisha's face, grinning, her jaw unhinged, her hollow eyes filled with shifting shadows. Then came the cold. The endless, merciless cold. By morning, the second team was gone. The radios were silent. And the snow, once gray, was now completely black. Far away, in the city of Srinagar, A radio operator working late that night heard something strange over the abandoned frequency of the missing unit. A girl's voice. Soft, giggling. Then, 3 knocks. And then, the line went dead. Would you like a final part to explain the true horror, or should the story remain a mystery? Days turned to weeks, and Kandarpura was declared lost. The government sealed off the area, calling it a restricted zone due to extreme weather conditions. No one was allowed near it. In 2024, an investigative journalist, Adil Mir, received a classified military report from an unknown source. It contained recordings, photos, and final transmissions from Captain Arif's unit. For years, the case of Kandarpura's disappearance remained an unsolved mystery. Those who tried to investigate either vanished or returned broken, unable to speak of what they had seen. A blizzard unlike anything before, one that swallowed villages, cut off entire regions, and buried the valley in darkness for 40 days. Then, the disappearances started. Small settlements near the forbidden zone reported people vanishing in their sleep. Entire families, no footprints, no struggle, just gone. Only their doors remained open, swaying in the icy wind. And then, the knocking returned. 3 knocks. Boom, boom, boom. The final expedition, a desperate team of scientists, led by Dr. Arman Shah, was sent to investigate. But before they even reached the site, their cameras began to fail. Their GPS glitched, showing them somewhere that did not exist. Then, at night, their radios crackled to life, and a voice whispered, "We never left." The next morning, the entire team was gone. But their tent remained. Inside, scrawled on every surface, was a message. "It is a door, it is a door, it is a door." Then, the blizzard stopped. And the village returned. The end of everything. Kandarpura should not exist. But it does. And now, it is spreading. Satellite images show new structures forming. Not just in Kashmir, but everywhere. Small, dark villages appearing overnight, in the mountains, in the deserts, on islands where no one has ever lived. And always, in every place. 3 knocks. And the whisper, "We never left." The last truth. What if Kandarpura was never a village? What if it was never abandoned? What if it was never even part of this world? What if it was just the beginning? Now, in the dead of night, people wake to soft giggling in their homes. They rush to lock their doors. But it's no use. Because the knocking has already begun. Boom, boom, boom. And if you open the door, you will never be seen again. But some mysteries refuse to stay buried. The last expedition, in 2025, a group of paranormal researchers, led by Dr. Nafisa Dar, set out to document the lost village. She believed that the truth behind Kandarpura was not supernatural, but an ancient psychological phenomenon tied to mass hysteria. She was wrong. Her team of 5 arrived at the coordinates where the village should have been. As expected, nothing, just an endless white wasteland. But then, as the sun began to set, the snow started to melt. Before their eyes, Kandarpura began to return. Buildings rose from beneath the ice, like corpses pulling themselves from shallow graves. The houses reappeared, their wooden doors still swinging open as if left in a hurry. Icicles dripped blood, though no bodies were in sight. The team's radios screamed with static. Then, the whispers began. They came from everywhere and nowhere, soft voices speaking in ancient dialect, calling them, inviting them inside. Then, 3 knocks. Boom, boom, boom. At every door. The cameraman, Samir, turned pale. "We need to leave." But before they could move, the doors opened. And from inside, the missing villagers stepped out. They were still alive. But their eyes were wrong. Black, endless, moving. A woman, her frozen lips trembling, reached out to Dr. Nafisa and whispered the final truth. "We are not the first, we will not be the last, it feeds." Then, the sky turned black. The sun vanished, and an unnatural darkness swallowed the village whole. And the screaming began. The forgotten place. The next day, rescue teams found the team's abandoned tents and equipment. Their cameras still recorded, but there were no people. Not a single body. And just like before, the village of Kandarpura was gone. Erased. As if it had never existed. But at night, if you listen closely to the wind in Kashmir, you can still hear them. The whispers. The knocking. The giggling of a little girl. And if you ever find yourself alone in the mountains, and you hear 3 knocks on your window, whatever you do not open the door. Because they never left. And now, they want you. It began with a storm. The world is gone. You don't breathe. The knocking comes again. Boom, boom, boom. The door rattles. And then it swings open. But there's nothing there. Only darkness. Deep, endless, alive. Then, a voice from inside the void, your own voice, whispers, "Come in." The truth you were never meant to know. Kandarpura was never a village. The world was never real. Everything, your memories, your home, your past, was built around a single door. A door that should never have been opened. A door that now leads to only one thing: the other side. And now, as you stand frozen, staring into the abyss, you realize you've been here before. You've always been here. Because you never left. Epilogue, the last shadow. The world wakes up. The sun rises. People go about their lives, unaware that something is missing. A person who used to exist. A story that was never told. A door that was never there. And somewhere, in a place that cannot be named, a new village appears. Silent, waiting. And in its center, a door stands open. Waiting for the next traveler. Waiting for you. But something remained. 2070, the only survivor, a lone traveler, wrapped in ragged clothes, wandered the silent, empty earth. No cities, no people, no light. Only the endless, frozen remains of a world that had been taken. His name was Kabir. And he had survived the way others had not. By never opening the door. The last place. One night, Kabir reached the Himalayas, hoping that whatever haunted the world hadn't reached the highest peaks. But as he climbed, he found something impossible. A village. Kandarpura. It shouldn't be there. It had been erased from time. Yet there it stood, untouched, as if waiting for him. And at its center, a single house with a single door. It was open. And from within the darkness, a voice whispered, "Come home." The final choice. Kabir knew what had happened to the world. He knew what had taken it. But he also knew he was tired. He had run for too long. So this time, he did something different. He stepped inside. The other side. The door slammed shut. And Kabir was no longer in Kandarpura. He was somewhere else. A world of shifting shadows and whispering mouths. A world where the lost ones still walked. Where the missing were never truly gone. And as he turned, he saw them. Arif, Aisha, the villagers, the soldiers, the scientists. All standing in the dark. Watching. Smiling. Waiting. And then, in the distance, he saw the doors. Thousands of them. Waiting to be opened. Waiting to take the next world. Waiting for you. Epilogue, the final knock. You wake up in your room. Your heart is pounding. It was just a story. Just a nightmare. Then, boom, boom, boom. 3 knocks. At your door. And a child's voice whispers, "We never left." Darkness swallowed the last cities. No one is left. Except for you. And now, the knocking has begun. Boom, boom, boom. You hold your breath. The door rattles. And then it opens. The truth revealed. There is no escape. There never was. Because Kandarpura was never a village. It was a door. And now, it is everywhere. Cities, towns, empty houses. All of them just doors. And beyond them? Something hungry, something waiting. And you? You are the last to see the truth. Because now, as the darkness pours in, and those black-eyed figures step forward, smiling, you finally understand. They were never ghosts. They were never lost. they were just the first to be taken. And now, it's your turn. Epilogue, 3 knocks, the world is silent. The last recording ever found contained only a single sound. Boom, boom, boom. Then, a child's voice. We never left. And then, nothing, the world ended. You don't move.